Back in the 1950s, the typical American family looked like something out of a magazine. Dad, mom, and a few kids. Families ate meals together, talked around the dinner table, and went to church on Sundays. There was a sense of unity, of sticking together no matter what. Family wasn't just important, it was everything. Most folks didn't wait too long to get married. Girls often married by 20 and boys by 23. Marriage wasn't just a chapter, it was the whole book. Divorce was rare. People worked through things. For better or worse meant something back then. You married for life, raised kids, and built a future together, brick by brick. In most households, the man went off to work in the morning with a packed lunch, while the wife stayed home, ran the house, and raised the children. She wasn't just a homemaker, she was the heart of the home. Laundry, dinner, discipline, love, it all came from her hands. The home ran like clockwork. When Dr. Benjamin Spock published The Common Sense Book of Baby and Child Care, it flew off shelves. Mothers everywhere read it like scripture. It told them to trust their instincts and treat their children with love and understanding. It was revolutionary. Parenting stopped being rigid and became more human, more tender, more personal. Spock changed everything. The economy was thriving. After the war, jobs were everywhere. Factories hummed and construction boomed. You could feel it in the air. People had hope again. Folks were earning money, buying homes, filling their garages with shiny cars. The American dream wasn't just an idea. It was something you could reach out and touch with both hands. A good yearly salary in 1950 was about $3,200, and by the end of the decade, you might be making $5,000. Doesn't sound like much now, but it was enough to buy a house, feed a family, and take the kids to the movies. Life was simpler. You didn't need much to feel like you had it all. Things were just more affordable back then. A house might set you back $9,000. A brand new car, maybe $1,800. A gallon of milk cost 90 cents, and you could grab a dozen eggs for under $1. You could feed the whole family on a few bucks and still have enough left over for a movie night. Every morning, the milkman would come clinking up the driveway, leaving fresh bottles of milk right on the doorstep. No need to go to the store. The glass bottles were heavy and cold, and you always remembered to bring the empties back out. It was personal, dependable, and just another small routine that made life feel special. Television was the newest wonder in the early 50s. Most families didn't have one yet, but by 1959, almost everyone did. It became the centerpiece of the living room. We'd gather around after dinner, eyes fixed on that little screen. It was black and white, a bit fuzzy, but magical. TV brought the world right into your home. No show lit up the screen like I Love Lucy. Lucille Ball made everyone laugh. Kids, moms, even grandpas. We'd sit together in the living room, glued to her antics. Lucy felt like a part of the family. Every week, she reminded us that life was funny, messy, and beautiful. It wasn't just a show, it was a ritual. Television in the 50s wasn't just entertainment, it shaped how we saw the world. Shows like Father Knows Best, Leave It to Beaver, and The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet weren't just fictional families, they were examples. We looked up to them. They gave us something to strive for, even if our real homes weren't quite that perfect. Westerns ruled the screen. Gunsmoke, The Lone Ranger, Maverick. Those cowboys were heroes to every boy in town. We'd pretend to be Marshall Dillon or hop on our imaginary horses, chasing outlaws through the backyard. Good guys wore white hats. Bad guys wore black. Simple rules. That's how we learned about right and wrong, watching the Wild West. Kids had their own lineup, too. Shows like Captain Kangaroo, Howdy Doody, and the Mickey Mouse Club were a part of our everyday lives. We'd plop down in front of the TV after school, cereal bowl in hand, and just escape. It felt like those characters were talking just to us. It was magical, innocent, and pure. Almost every boy owned a Davy Crockett coonskin cap. It was the hottest thing after the show aired. You'd see us on bikes with those little tails bouncing behind our heads, singing that song, Born on a Mountaintop in Tennessee. For a while, everyone wanted to be a frontiersman. That hat meant you were brave, just like Davy. Girls in the 50s had a style all their own. Poodle skirts with that stitched-on dog, bobby socks rolled just right, and ponytails tied with bright ribbons. On Friday nights at the sock hop, they'd swirl around the dance floor while the jukebox played Elvis. That fashion wasn't just cute, it was a statement of fun, youth, and freedom. Rock and roll wasn't just music, it was a revolution. Elvis, Buddy Holly, Chuck Berry, and Jerry Lee Lewis changed everything. We'd dance in basements, garages, even grocery store aisles. It was fast, loud, rebellious, and our parents hated it. That only made us love it more. It felt like something was waking up inside America. Elvis Presley wasn't just a singer, he was a storm. When he first swiveled those hips on live TV, the whole country gasped. Dads called it nonsense, moms blushed, and kids went wild. His voice, his look, it was electric. He gave us permission to break the mold, to scream, dance, and feel something new. Going to the movies was an event. You dressed up, bought a ticket for 50 cents, and sat in a dark theater with 100 strangers. When the lights dimmed, the screen lit up with Technicolor dreams. It was where we first saw heroes like John Wayne or swooned over Marilyn Monroe. For 2 hours, life paused. In the early part of the decade, 3D movies became all the rage. You'd wear those flimsy red and blue glasses and jump when things came flying towards you. It was silly and fun, and kids loved it. The novelty wore off fast, but for a couple of years, 3D felt like the future. We'd never seen anything like it. By the late 50s, drive-in theaters had taken over. You'd pull up in your car, roll down the windows, and hang a metal speaker on the door. The screen loomed large in the night sky. Couples cuddled, kids ran around barefoot. Watching a movie under the stars, that was something special. It felt like freedom. Charlton Heston brought epic storytelling to life. The 10 Commandments was more than a movie, it was an experience. When the Red Sea parted, people gasped out loud in theaters. The sets, the music, the costumes, it was Hollywood's way of saying, we can do anything. You walked out feeling like you'd just seen something sacred. James Dean spoke to an entire generation of lost, restless teens. With just one look, he made us feel seen. Rebel Without a Cause wasn't just a film. It was a reflection of every kid that didn't fit in. He died young, but that red jacket and haunted gaze stayed with us. He became legend overnight. John Wayne was the picture of rugged American strength. Whether he was wrangling cattle or charging into battle, he never backed down. You didn't just watch his movies, you believed in them. In a world that sometimes felt uncertain, The Duke made everything simple. Fight for what's right, protect the weak, and walk tall. Marilyn Monroe lit up the screen with charm, beauty, and vulnerability. From The 7-Year Itch to Some Like It Hot, she wasn't just acting, she was captivating. Men adored her, women envied her, and everyone watched her. She was Hollywood's golden girl, wrapped in satin and secrets. Nobody sparkled quite like Marilyn. Marlon Brando brought something new to acting. He didn't just say lines, he lived them. Whether he was brooding in Streetcar Named Desire or raging in On the Waterfront, he made every scene feel raw. He was unpredictable, intense, and unlike anything we'd ever seen.
Movies like Singing in the Rain and 12 Angry Men weren't just entertainment, they were art. One made you want to dance in a puddle, the other made you question justice. They made you feel, think, laugh, cry. The 1950s gave us stories that stuck with us long after the credits rolled. Animated classics like Cinderella, Peter Pan, and Lady and the Tramp captured our hearts. We'd watch wide-eyed as magic unfolded on screen. The songs stayed in our heads for days. Disney films weren't just cartoons, they were dreams we could visit again and again. They made childhood feel like it could last forever. Baseball was more than just a game, it was a way of life. We collected cards, listened to games on the radio, and mimicked Mantle's swing in the backyard. Ballparks smelled like peanuts and hot dogs. Every kid knew the stats. On warm summer nights, there was nothing better than hearing, "Play ball." Boxing was one of the most popular sports in the country. Radios crackled with excitement during a big fight. Rocky Marciano was a household name, undefeated and unstoppable. Sugar Ray Robinson and Jake LaMotta had slugfests that people still talk about. Back then, boxing felt like poetry in motion, and sometimes a barroom brawl. In the 1950s, the National Football League was starting to win America's heart. Sundays became game days. Stars like Bobby Lane and Frank Gifford became heroes in cleats. The hits were rough, the helmets thin, and the crowds loud. It wasn't the polished game we know today, but it was full of grit and heart. College football had its own magic. The University of Oklahoma, led by Coach Bud Wilkinson, won 47 games straight. It felt like they couldn't lose. Radios across the country buzzed with excitement. In diners, barber shops, and living rooms, folks argued about plays and bragged about alma maters. College ball was passion in its purest form. The NBA was still young, but names like George Mikan and Bob Pettit began making headlines. Basketball didn't have the glitz it has now, but the fans were loyal. Games were played in small arenas under dim lights. You could feel every squeak of the sneakers and every cheer echo through your chest. Teens spent their evenings at soda fountains, ordering cherry cokes and chocolate malts. You'd slide into a booth with friends, feed a dime into the jukebox, and talk for hours. It wasn't just about the drinks, it was about the feeling. The fizzy sweetness, the clinking glasses, and the laughter that made it all unforgettable. You could still buy penny candy at the local corner store. Rows of glass jars filled with licorice, jawbreakers, and wax lips. You'd dig into your pocket for change and make tough decisions. 10 pieces or just 5 really good ones. It was childhood condensed into sugar and choice, all for a few cents. Shopping was a different kind of experience. Families headed to department stores downtown, dressed in their Sunday best. You didn't just browse, you admired. Salespeople were polite, mannequins stood proud, and store windows were works of art. Buying a new dress or pair of shoes felt like a special occasion, not just another errand. Groceries weren't picked up in bulk. You went a few times a week to the butcher, the baker, the produce man. People knew your name. You'd talk about the weather, your kids, or the ball game. Grocery shopping wasn't just a chore, it was a part of your social life. Everyone knew everyone. Gas stations were full service. You'd pull up and a man in a crisp uniform would clean your windshield, check your oil, and fill your tank, all with a smile. He might even give your kid a lollipop. There were no apps, no card readers, just conversation, trust, and a handshake at the end. Cars were rolling pieces of art. Two-tone paint jobs, massive tail fins, wide white wall tires. They didn't just drive, they made a statement. Owning a Chevrolet Bel Air or a Ford Fairlane made you feel like you'd arrived. Saturday afternoons were for polishing the chrome and showing it off on Main Street. Maps were paper, and road trips were an adventure. Dad unfolded the map on the hood of the car, Mom pointed out motels, and kids sat in the back seat playing I Spy. There were no GPS systems, no smartphones, just the open road, the radio, and the thrill of not knowing exactly what was next. Motels and roadside diners dotted the highways. You'd stop for burgers, fries, and thick milkshakes served by smiling waitresses in aprons. Every diner had a jukebox, and every booth had stories. Traveling felt personal, intimate, like America was inviting you in, one neon sign and greasy spoon at a time. Schools were strict but nurturing. You stood when the teacher entered. You said yes, ma'am, and no, sir. Discipline came with a ruler, or in some places a paddle, but there was also warmth, story time, singing patriotic songs, and smelling chalk best and freshly sharpened pencils in every hallway. It was a different kind of respect. Every classroom had a film projector. Teachers would roll it in with a cart, thread the film, and turn out the lights. We'd hear that familiar beep telling us to change the slide. It was a break from the books. Those black and white educational films taught us everything, from science to how to be polite. Kids took pride in buying books from Scholastic catalogs. You'd flip through the little newspaper flyer, circle what you wanted, and bring coins to school in an envelope. Weeks later, your teacher handed out the orders. That little stack of books with your name on it, it felt like Christmas morning right at your desk. Parachute day in gym class was something every kid waited for. We'd all hold the colorful edges, lifting it high and ducking underneath as it floated down like a cloud. It wasn't just exercise, it was laughter, teamwork, and the thrill of being part of something simple, fun, and beautiful. We never wanted it to end. Book reports were made with shoebox dioramas. You'd craft tiny scenes with paper figures, cotton clouds, and construction paper trees. The night before, the whole family might help, cutting, gluing, painting. You carried it carefully to school, hoping it wouldn't fall apart. It was more than homework. It was a tiny world you built with pride. School assemblies featured local police mascots or fire department puppets teaching safety. They were cheesy, but we loved them. The gym filled with laughter, applause, and squeaky microphones. It was a break from routine, a little excitement that gave us something to talk about on the playground for the rest of the week.
Audrey Hepburn and Elizabeth Taylor set the standard for glamour. Audrey's elegance in Roman Holiday, her charm in Sabrina. She was grace personified. Elizabeth's fiery spirit in Giant or Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, she had a presence that filled the room. These weren't just actresses, they were icons. Teenagers would gather at sock hops and school gyms, their shoes off to protect the polished floor. The music was loud, the lights were low, and the dances were simple but full of energy. Boys slicked their hair back with pomade, and girls twirled in poodle skirts. It was our version of a Saturday night out. Haircuts were a regular ritual for boys. You sat in a chrome barber chair, the striped cape around your neck as the buzz of clippers hummed. A splash of aftershave, a look in the mirror, and you felt like a new man, even if you were only 10. The barber knew your name, and probably your dad's too. Every home had a sewing machine. Moms made dresses, patched pants, it even stitched Halloween costumes by hand. The steady clack of the needle, the hum of the motor, it was the soundtrack of the kitchen table on many quiet evenings. Store-bought was nice, but homemade, that meant love. Radio was still king in many homes. You'd turn the dial and find your favorite programs, dramas, comedies, westerns. Kids would lie on the floor, eyes closed, letting their imaginations do the work. Long before podcasts and Bluetooth speakers, families shared quiet moments around glowing knobs and rich voices that painted vivid pictures in the mind. School lunches came in metal lunch boxes with matching thermoses. Whether it was Superman, Roy Rogers, or Hopalong Cassidy on the front, that box said something about who you were. Moms packed sandwiches, fruit, and cookies, and when you opened that lid in the cafeteria, it felt like a piece of home had come with you. Saturdays meant chores, but they also meant cartoons at the theater. We'd pay a quarter, get a popcorn, and watch Bugs Bunny, Tom and Jerry, and Woody Woodpecker on the big screen. It was loud, silly, and thrilling. That screen flickering in the dark made even the simplest animation feel larger than life. Before air conditioning became common, summer nights were spent on front porches. Neighbors would chat, kids caught fireflies, and everyone waited for a breeze. The sound of cicadas, the creak of rocking chairs, and the hum of conversation filled the air. You knew who lived on your block, and they knew you. Housewives followed soap operas on the radio and later on TV. Shows like As the World Turns and Guiding Light were daily rituals. Dishes got done during commercial breaks, and plot twists were the talk of coffee meetups. These dramas gave women an escape, a peek into lives more dramatic than their own. Boys built go-karts from scrap wood and old wheels. We'd race them down hilly streets, legs out, hearts pounding. There were no helmets, no brakes, just gravity and guts. We might skin a knee or scrape a palm, but that freedom, that rush of wind and laughter, that was worth every Band-Aid. Home economics was a staple for girls in school. They learned to cook, sew, and set the perfect dinner table. It wasn't just about chores. It was about pride, tradition, and preparing for the world. Meanwhile, boys took shop class, building bird houses and sanding wood. Gender roles were clear, but so was the craftsmanship. Magazines like Life, Look, and the Saturday Evening Post sat proudly on every coffee table. You didn't just flip through them. You studied the pictures, read every caption, and saved your favorite covers. They told stories, captured moments, and showed us what the rest of America looked like, felt like, dreamed like.
Every kid owned a Slinky. We'd race them downstairs, stretch them between our hands, or just marvel at how they walked by themselves. It was a simple toy, made of metal, but it fascinated us for hours. You didn't need batteries, just gravity, curiosity, and a set of stairs. Christmas catalogs from Sears or Montgomery Ward were events in themselves. Kids would lie on the floor, circling toys in red crayon, dreaming aloud. Bikes, dolls, trains. It was a holiday ritual. That thick book wasn't just a catalog. It was pure possibility, packed in glossy pages and childhood wonder. Every neighborhood had his paperboy. Rain or shine, before school, he'd pedal down the street flinging folded papers onto porches. We'd wake to the thump on the doorstep, smell the ink, and read the headlines over breakfast. That kid wasn't just delivering news. He was a small part of America's rhythm. Tupperware parties were a social event. Housewives gathered in living rooms, chatting over punch and cookies, while a hostess showed off burping lids and stackable bowls. It was more than plastic. It was community. Women bonded over storage solutions and swapped recipes, all while supporting their friends' side hustle, long before it had a name. Men wore fedoras to the office and church. A good hat said something: class, confidence, maturity. You didn't leave the house without one, and tipping your brim was a proper greeting. Hats weren't just fashion. They were part of the man. And when JFK stopped wearing one, it felt like the end of an era. The housecoat was a must-have for every homemaker. It wasn't quite a dress, but not pajamas either. Just something practical and comfy for cleaning, cooking, and answering the door. Moms wore them with hair curlers and slippers, whirling through the house in a blur of efficiency. It was quiet power, disguised in cotton. People smoked everywhere, indoors, outdoors, even on airplanes. It was seen as stylish, sophisticated. Ashtrays sat on every table, cigarette machines lined restaurants, and ads featured doctors recommending brands. No one questioned it. You lit up at dinner, after coffee, at work. The air was thick, and yet, somehow, that was just normal life. Sunday church was sacred. Families dressed in their finest, boys in stiff collars, girls in gloves and hats. You sat through hymns and sermons, whispered jokes in the pews, and afterwards shook hands with neighbors you'd known your whole life. Faith wasn't just private, it was the glue of many communities. Ice cream trucks jingled down neighborhood streets every summer afternoon. The second you heard the chimes, you'd grab loose change, sprint barefoot down the sidewalk, and line up behind every kid on the block. A bomb pop, a drumstick, maybe a push-up pop. That cold, sticky joy made a hot day perfect. Bowling alleys were weekend hangouts. The sound of pins crashing, the smell of rented shoes, and the clack of the ball return, it was sensory heaven. Whether you bowled a strike or a gutter ball, you laughed with friends, ordered fries at the snack bar, and kept playing. Bowling nights felt like mini celebrations. Phone calls happened on rotary phones with curly cords that stretched across the room. You really had to mean it to dial someone. Each number clicked slowly as the wheel turned. No caller ID, no texting. If someone called, you picked up. And if you missed it, well, they'd call back, eventually. You didn't binge TV shows. You waited all week for one episode. Thursday nights meant families gathered around the television, adjusting the antenna, praying the signal held. If you missed a show, that was it. You'd hear about it the next day and have to wait for reruns. It made every episode feel special. Laundry wasn't easy. Washing machines were bulky and loud, and dryers, not everyone had one. Clotheslines stretched across every backyard. Moms hung shirts, sheets, and socks with wooden clothespins. The scent of sun-dried laundry on a breezy day, that's something today's machines just can't recreate. It smelled like home.
People wrote letters, real ones, ink on paper. You'd sit down with a cup of coffee and tell your story in neat cursive. Birth announcements, holiday cards, even just updates on daily life. Trips to the mailbox were exciting. You never knew when a cousin from 3 states away would send a smile in an envelope. Dinosaurs fascinated every kid. You didn't have CGI or museums with high-tech exhibits, just plastic figurines, books, and your imagination. Tyrannosaurus, Stegosaurus, Triceratops, we memorized the names like they were our friends. Every sandbox dig felt like an archaeological discovery. We were many explorers with dirty hands and wide eyes. You listened to baseball games on the radio, lying on your back in the living room, eyes closed, letting the announcer paint the picture. Crack of the bat, roar of the crowd, you could see it all without seeing a thing. Radio made sports feel personal, like the game was happening right inside your soul. Skating rinks were electric. You lace up those 4-wheeled skates and cruise around the hardwood floor to the sound of jukebox hits. Holding hands, falling down, and getting back up, roller skating was freedom with a side of bruised knees. Under the disco lights, everything felt like a dance. Family photos were taken with big box cameras. You'd gather in your Sunday best, squint into the sun, and stand perfectly still. One click, one shot, no retakes, no filters. You wouldn't see the photo until it was developed days later. And somehow, every picture still told a better story than most selfies today. Comic books were treasures. Superman, Batman, Archie, and Richie Rich filled our afternoons with adventure. You lie on the floor, flipping through each colorful page, totally lost in the story. Comics weren't just fun. They were escapes, lessons, even beginnings for dreams. For just a dime, you could enter another world. Kids played jacks on the porch or marbles in the dirt. It didn't matter if your toys were shiny or simple. A good game came from imagination. You learned to win, to lose, and to shake hands either way. It wasn't about beating someone. It was about sharing a moment that didn't need a screen. Toasters had real weight to 'em. Chrome gleamed, knobs clicked with purpose, and when that toast popped, it was an event. Breakfast wasn't rushed. You sat at the table, buttered your toast, and read the paper. Kitchens back then didn't need gadgets. They had rituals. Toast was just the start of the day. Fireworks on the 4th of July meant community. You'd spread a blanket on the grass, hold a sparkler in one hand and a soda in the other. Kids ran wild with excitement, and when that first boom echoed in the sky, everyone looked up together. For a few minutes, the whole town shared the same heartbeat. Fathers joined the Boy Scouts and earned badges with real effort, camping, knot tying, helping neighbors. We pitched tents, learned to start fires, and told ghost stories under the stars. It wasn't about checking boxes. It was about growing up with friends, learning responsibility, and singing silly songs around a campfire that crackled with promise. Magazines offered more than headlines. They offered dreams.
Flipping through Better Homes and Gardens or Popular Mechanics, you'd see the future in full color. Fancy kitchens, flying cars, and space-age inventions. Even if you never built that backyard barbecue, just imagining it made life feel full of hope. Kids collected bottle caps. We'd pry 'em off soda bottles, trade 'em like currency, and keep 'em in old cookie tins under our beds. No two were the same. Coca-Cola, RC, Nahee, Orange Crush. It wasn't about the value, it was about the hunt, the collection, the pride in lining 'em up just right. Parents tucked you in every night. They didn't just flip the light switch. They sat on the edge of the bed, pulled the blanket up to your chin, and maybe told a story or sang a lullaby. That quiet moment before sleep, that was love in its purest, most peaceful form. Every home had an ironing board set up in the kitchen or living room. Moms ironed shirts until they were crisp as newspaper. Steam hissed and the smell of fresh cotton filled the air. Clothes were pressed, creased, and folded with care. Wrinkles weren't just smoothed, they were defeated with pride. Driveways turned into basketball courts. A rusty hoop above the garage, a worn-out ball, and hours of free throws. We didn't have coaches or uniforms, just friendly rivalries and scraped knees. The sound of a bouncing ball on pavement echoed through summer evenings as dads peeked out the window, smiling at the next future star. People fixed things instead of throwing them away. Radios, shoes, toasters. If something broke, Dad rolled up his sleeves, grabbed his tools, and got to work. Repair wasn't a hobby, it was a way of life. You respected what you owned because you worked hard for it. Nothing was disposable, not even your word.
Babies wore cloth diapers, washed and reused dozens of times. Mothers scrubbed, folded, and penned each one with love. There weren't wipe warmers or scented creams, just powder, patience, and care. A crying baby wasn't a nuisance, it was life. And somehow the house still smelled like fresh laundry and Sunday dinner. Pianos sat proudly in living rooms. Someone, often Mom, knew how to play. On quiet evenings, music would fill the house, sometimes with skill, sometimes with missed notes and laughter. Family sing-alongs weren't planned, they just happened. Music came from fingertips, not speakers, and every song held a little piece of your home's soul. Window shopping downtown was an afternoon activity. You'd stroll past department store displays, admire mannequins, and maybe step inside for a treat. There were no malls, no online carts, just polished windows, helpful clerks, and a sense of wonder. Even if you never bought a thing, it still felt like time well spent. Every neighborhood had a corner drugstore. You could grab a malt, pick up a prescription, and chat with the pharmacist who knew your name. Candy was behind the counter, and comic books lined the wire racks. It wasn't just a store, it was a heartbeat of the community, humming gently in the background of daily life. Fathers kept tools in wooden toolboxes, not plastic ones. Heavy hammers, rusty wrenches, and oil-stained screwdrivers passed down from Grandpa. They weren't organized, but they worked. That box smelled like sawdust and grease. And when something needed fixing, Dad didn't call anyone. He reached for that box, tightened his belt, and got it done. Kids got excited when the teacher rolled in the big TV on wheels. It meant an educational film, maybe about space or manners or the dangers of running with scissors. The screen flickered, the class hushed, and we all leaned forward, For half an hour, school felt like a movie theater, and we loved it. Home-cooked meals were the norm. Meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans, and Jell-O for dessert. Dinner was at the table every night, no distractions. The TV was off, elbows off the table, and "How was your day?" really meant something. Meals weren't just about eating. They were about connection, rhythm, and holding life together one bite at a time. And maybe the most beautiful thing, life moved slower. People lingered. They waved to neighbors, read the paper cover to cover, watched the sun set without checking a clock. There was time to breathe, to notice, to be present. The 1950s weren't perfect, but they sure had heart, and that's something we'll never forget. Front doors were rarely locked. Neighbors watched out for each other. Kids roamed freely, and trust filled the air. If you needed sugar, you knocked. If someone was sick, casseroles appeared. There was safety in community and strength in simplicity. It wasn't just a neighborhood. It was home, and everyone belonged.